Welcome to the Anime Audiophile Podcast. Enjoy. Itachi Shinden, Book of Bright Light. Chapter 3 Part 2. Was it an act? Or was he really sleeping? The only way to find out was to just attack him directly. Itachi pulled a kunai from his breast pocket and threw it. The blade flew in a straight line toward the face of the sleeping Nemui. His body, rocking from side to side, shook violently and just barely evaded the kunai. Was he awake? At any rate, the other boy's eyes were closed, so Itachi couldn't use the Sharingan. Nemui stood upright, still sleeping, as though the attack of the previous moment hadn't happened. Just when Itachi noticed him swaying violently once more, Nemui disappeared from his field of view again. Faster than the eye could follow, Itachi danced up into the sky. Nemui's lightning-covered arm swept through the spot where Itachi had been standing. Itachi landed near the wall to put some space between them and caught his enemy in his field of view. His thoughts were racing at a dizzying speed, trying somehow to analyze the phenomenon happening before his eyes. He couldn't use the Sharingan and all the chakra that consumed. In the formula for an overwhelming victory, the Sharingan was essential. He needed to keep it aside until that time came. But he was confident he could unravel the phenomenon before him using the decade of experience he had already. He didn't need to rely on the power of the Sharingan. Think. He stared at Nemui, wobbling off in the distance. He had to assume that his enemy was using a type of technique that brought out the full potential of his physical abilities through the selfless state of mind that was sleep. By sleeping, he kept the ego in check, and he could carry out specialized movement through pure instinct and animal intuition alone. His opponent's somnolence had surprised him, so he had lost sight of the fact that this fight was basically about physical abilities. If he simply concentrated on his physical abilities, he could easily stand in the same arena as this boy. He focused all his attention on the enemy before his eyes. Wobbly Nemui twitched. He was coming. Vision, hearing, scent, all his senses. He felt Nemui with everything he had. He caught his aura tracing the wall to his right. Lightning. He dodged. It's all right. So Itachi was better physically superior, after all. Once he knew that, it was possible to deal with this. With flowing movements, he evaded the attacks launched from Nemui's selfless dream state. He had a flash of insight. Why did his enemy specialize in a technique that relies on sleeping? He imagined what his enemy thought about while he was asleep. If he was sealing away his self to increase his physical abilities, then there was a real possibility that he lost his memory, as well. If that were true, then Nemui didn't remember the self who fought. If I can wake him up, I can win. Why did Nemui need a technique like that? Because he was a coward. He was totally terrified of hurting anyone, of being hurt. So he escaped into sleep. If Nemui was a coward, then he would be afraid of the endless sleep, the one no one woke from. You had to have your eyes open in order to carefully examine a situation. That moment would clinch his victory. The back and forth of Nemui attacking and Itachi dodging gracefully lasted about 10 minutes. Just when people in the arena were starting to fuss about the lack of any real developments, it happened. Nemui stopped abruptly, shook faintly, and lifted his closed eyelids the tiniest bit. Their eyes met. This was the moment Itachi had been waiting for. He poured his chakra into his eyes. Sharingan. It took less than 1/100th of a second to activate. Itachi was betting on that moment. He hammered into Nemui's pupils the detailed image he had drawn in his mind while dodging attacks. Yee! Nemui shrieked. Awake for a mere instant, he fell asleep once more. I did it! He slipped around from the rear and slit Nemui's throat with his kunai. The image Itachi had imagined so faithfully, down to the very last detail, became reality, replaying in his enemy's mind. Nemui died, his throat slashed. But he was aware that he was still alive, and he opened his eyes again. But he couldn't sleep as soundly anymore. Itachi dodged Nemui's attacks for a few minutes, but then his opponent's eyelids fluttered once more. In an instant, his field of view was dyed red. This time, the image was of Itachi gouging into his stomach. Repeat. Each time he was killed, Nemui's sleep grew lighter. Stabbed, strangled, beaten, poisoned, Itachi killed the boy any and every way possible. Finally, Nimue couldn't sleep at all. If he closed his eyes, Itachi would kill him. After being subjected to brutal deaths over and over and over, he was now completely ruled by his fear of the final sleep. He. Chest heaving, almost hyperventilating, Nimue trembled and shook. The spectators had no idea what was happening. At best, only a few people there had realized Itachi was using the Sharingan. Itachi continued to evade his attacks, while Nemui's movements gradually grew sluggish. Sweat streamed down Nemui's face. He started to cry. Itachi hadn't once used a physical attack on him. "Help me," Nimue groaned in supplication. He fell to his knees and began weeping loudly. I don't want to die anymore. Please, help me. Please. We have a winner." The examiner stepped in between the two of them. The arena fell silent. Everyone seemed to be confused by the incomprehensible situation. Nimue wailed and wept, half mad, right up until he disappeared, carried out in the examiner's arms. "I don't want to die," he cried over and over, the terror in his voice reaching into every nook and cranny of the arena, sending shivers up spines. He would probably give up on being a ninja. That was the level of fear Itachi had put into him. Ninja were the main cause of fighting in this world. One fewer ninja meant that much less fighting. Itachi hadn't been wrong to break Nemui's spirit so utterly and horribly. The venue felt the same. Itachi had, all by himself, produced the aura of death that wafted through the entire arena. He had demonstrated an incomprehensible power, and the ninja from all lands now knew his unfathomable strength. "We mustn't make an enemy of this boy." The more people who thought that, the less likely that Konoha would get dragged into battle. Using the Sharingan to cast genjutsu was an effective means of making his opponent see visions. But if he used this trick the right way, he could turn it into the famed genjutsu of suggestion on a large number of people like this. It's all to rid this world of fighting. Itachi was grateful from the bottom of his heart to the Konoha officials who permitted him to take part in the Chunin exams. He turned his back on the arena, now empty of Nimue and the examiner, and started walking. In the silence, he could hear someone clapping. He lifted his head and looked in the direction of the sound. A face, covered on the right side with bandages. "Shimura Danzo," Itachi murmured, not attaching any of the honorifics he should have to the name. A dark, twisted smile stretched out on Danzo's lips as he looked down at Itachi. 2. "My son has been promoted to Chunin," Fugaku noted dispassionately before the assembled brethren. Beside him, Itachi stood smartly in a Konoha jacket. "Congratulations." It was his father's trusted aide Yashiro who spoke. His normally narrow eyes narrowed even further as he smiled. The brethren quickly followed suit, shouting out their congratulations in unison. "Say a few words," his father urged. "Yes," Itachi replied, in a voice devoid of emotion. He bowed deeply toward the brethren. "I am prepared to continue to devote myself body and soul to the path of the ninja, for the sake of Konoha, and for the sake of the clan. I look forward to walking it alongside you all." Itachi's short speech was far more grown-up than his 10 years would seem to allow. In the first exam, he had gotten a score second only to the record holder, Namikaze Minato, and he had completed the second exam in the shortest time ever on record, even though he was alone, and not in the usual 3-person cell. In the third exam, his opponent in the first match had defaulted, leaving him the win, while his performance in the second bout led officials to decide there was no need for him to take part in the third match. And so, his exams ended. Obviously, Itachi was promoted to Chunin. Fugaku's son was a ninja blessed with a terrifying talent. Occasionally, Fugaku almost forgot the boy was his son and felt jealous of the genius he possessed. If a ninja of Itachi's caliber joined the military police force, it might perhaps improve the standing of the Uchihas within the village, the long-haired Inabi said joyfully. Looking down on that head of shiny black hair, Fugaku gave voice to his own thoughts. I have no intention of letting Itachi into the military police force. At once, a stir rose up in the room. But Itachi simply stared silently into space, giving no outward sign of surprise. Had his son understood? A feeling of doubt welled up in Fugaku, but he couldn't exactly question the boy here in front of everyone. Changing gears, he spoke to the brethren. I would like to have my son go into the Umbu. The Umbu, Yashiro spat out, a note of animosity in his voice. Fugaku nodded silently. Our military police force and the Umbu have clashed any number of times in pursuit of public order in Konoha. Yashiro began to reproach him. I know that better than anyone, he snapped. To maintain the peace in Konoha, the Konoha military police force had been established with the Uchiha clan as its center. Even now, with Fugaku as the chief, the military police force worked day and night for the sake of Konoha. In other words, the military police force policed the village. However, there was another force that maintained the peace, the Umbu. Under the direct control of the Hokage, the Umbu was a unit composed of capable ninja, and basically always made an appearance on important missions inside and in the vicinity of the village. Major crimes committed in the village were taken out of the hands of the military police force and entrusted to the Umbu. There was no clear line between what was the jurisdiction of the military police force and what was the subject for investigation by the Umbu. At the discretion of the Hokage, the nature of the investigation would simply shift from one to the other. This led the military police and the Umbu to clash every so often. And each time they did, Fugaku would stand at the head of the military police and negotiate with the Hokage and the Umbu. He knew better than anyone the friction between the two peacekeeping forces. The main building of Mikano Shrine erupted in raucous discussion. Some criticized the Umbu, others tried to guess at Fugaku's true intentions, still others noted Konoha's treatment of the Uchiha clan. The different resentments they each held in their hearts exploded into the closed space of the shrine, all at once. Listen to me, Fugaku roared. The main shrine fell silent, filled with an undirected bloodlust. I understand how you all feel. Fugaku began speaking slowly, choosing his words carefully. I feel the same way. Which is exactly why Itachi will join the Umbu. I intend to have my son act as a conduit between the village and the clan. Everyone present held their breath. As you all know, members of the Umbu Foundation are secretly watching over our compound. In which case, we will also bring watchful eyes to the village. And you're saying that's Itachi? Fugaku nodded at Yashiro's question. The people of his clan stirred once more. But we are all comrades of the same village, he heard a murmured voice say, and it seemed he was not the only one to hear it. Flitting in a moment of silence, the voice had reached the ears of everyone in the building. Its owner stood beside him. Itachi was silent now, head hanging as if to avoid their eyes, a sad look on his face. What did you just say? Yashiro asked. Eyes still turned to the ground, Itachi started speaking without seeming to direct his words at any one person. The Senju clan and the people of Konoha are still our village comrades. We should stop creating this distance and doing things to fan the flames of rivalry. The bloodlust blanketing the room grew thicker. Itachi appeared to notice this, too. But regardless, he continued to speak. One side does one thing, the other does it too. You kill your opponent, someone comes for revenge. And then a fight breaks out. Are you siding with Konoha? You're looking at things from the perspective of who is your ally, so you can't see the big picture. You! An enraged Yashiro leapt to his feet, reaching as if to grab hold of Itachi's collar. Fugaku stopped the hand of his trusted aide. Chief, Yashiro shouted, anger bleeding into his voice. Calm yourself. But it's fine. Calm yourself. With an ostentatious sigh, Yashiro's Saturday Itachi didn't so much as twitch, but instead stayed silent, head still hanging. Apologize, Itachi. Everyone turned angry eyes on the silent Itachi. I understand what you're trying to say, Fugaku said. But ideals and reality are two different things. What you're saying is at best an ideal. Fighting and war are indeed linked with hatred. But you are too young to understand the true predicament of those who are persecuted. If you could see what a difficult position the Uchiha clan has been driven to since the founding of the village, you wouldn't speak so lightly or impulsively. I'm a member of the Uchiha clan, too. I know about the predicament of the clan. Then apologize, Yashiro shouted. A sad look in his eyes, Itachi slowly turned his gaze on Yashiro. I'm very sorry, he said in a voice that nearly disappeared. Fugaku clearly heard the cry of pain in his son's heart. He understood, almost agonizingly well, Itachi's desire to avoid fighting. But he understood to an equal extent the dissatisfaction of their brethren. Or rather, Fugaku himself had had trying experiences any number of times in the life he had lived thus far as a Konoha ninja. Simply because he was Uchiha, he had been excluded from the village center. The dreams he had in his youth had been cruelly shattered, for the sole reason that he was of the Uchiha clan. Hokage. A fleeting desire that would never be achieved. We'll talk about this at home, he said, pitching his voice so that only his son could hear him. He got no reply. Master Itachi. The voice was shrill enough to pierce his eardrums. Itachi turned around. Konoha was full of people coming and going in the evening. He himself was on his way home from making an appearance at the Hokage residence to take care of procedures for his Chunin promotion. Standing before him was a girl he had seen before. Older than he was. The girl who had been his teammate until 6 months earlier. Himuka. Suzuki's Himuka, the girl told him her name as if reading the confused Itachi's mind. That was the first Itachi had ever heard of the surname Suzuki's. Congratulations on your promotion. Thanks. Himuka was older than he was. But as a ninja, Itachi was more experienced. Given his strange position, he was at a loss for what sort of words to use. Should he speak more politely? Or should he talk informally? After a minute of indecision, he had landed on thanks. Not noticing this indecision on his part, Himuka looked at him with shining eyes. I really admire you so much for getting such incredible results in the Chunin exams. I'm proud that we worked on the same team together, even if it was only for a little while. He didn't know how to respond. He wasn't fighting so people would praise him or be proud of him. Are you still on the team with that quiet guy? You mean Yoji, right? That was his name. Around the same time as it was decided you'd be taking the Chunin exams, Yoji was transferred somewhere else, and I haven't seen him since. Transferred? It was pretty sudden. He didn't even say goodbye. Something felt weird about this. What kind of transfer happened so suddenly you couldn't even say goodbye? There was only one thing he could think of. The Umbu. But Yoji had only just been made a genin. And Itachi couldn't remember him ever doing anything vaguely amazing when they went on missions together. I'm working hard now, with Master Yuki and 2 new teammates. Himuka recounted in a bright tone. As he looked at her, Itachi carved the name Yoji into one corner of his heart. 3. Lately, every time you come over, you end up talking about Uchiha Itachi, the Hokage said, sitting in his chair and puffing on his pipe. Danzo stood at attention, watching him. He had advised Hiruzen before that a ninja shouldn't smoke, given that the scent of tobacco would linger on him. Hiruzen had laughed, and replied that the Hokage didn't go on secret missions, so it was fine. Danzo hadn't been talking about the present. He was talking about being prepared. Hokage or genin, a ninja must never forget that at any given moment, in any given place, they were at war. If they needed to not be noticed by an enemy, the scent of the smoke hanging around Hiruzen would give them away. Nothing was absolute in this world. Unaware of what Danzo was thinking, Hiruzen emptied the ashes from his pipe into a dish on the desk, grabbed a pinch of tobacco from the container to one side, and put a flame to the bowl of the pipe. Purple smoke rose up and rolled out the window, disappearing on the wind, piercing Danzo's nose. Even as he winced at the unpleasant smell, his expression did not change in the slightest. Hiruzen was an acquaintance from his genin days. Danzo had never once used the word friend. Friendship was the product of feelings of collusion between human beings. People used the word friend for the wretched idea of leaning on another person. Danzo had never wanted to lean on someone or be leaned on himself. So he never used soft words like friend. Exhaling smoke, Hiruzen turned his eyes on Danzo. Just as you said, it's been 5 months since he was promoted to Chunin. And Itachi has carried out his missions almost too perfectly. Even on missions using genin, he has such a grasp on each of their areas of specialization and gives such impeccable orders, it's hard to believe he's only 11. The reports he sends in, too, are very nicely in order, strictly following the format. So those 2 years as a genin were a loss to both Itachi and to the village? Better to think of it as necessary experience. Hiruzen always considered things in a positive light. This way of his was likely what earned him his popularity among the ninja out in the light. However, ninja were essentially creatures of the dark. Danzo always thought it was funny that they set up the Umbu, as if they could keep the light and the dark separate. Speaking of, Hiruzen dumped ashes into the dish, and sighed. Then he sat up a little straighter in his chair. Lately, long hours of desk work tire me out. Maybe I'm just old. That's your job. Not a single word of sympathy for me? Tell me the story you are about to start. Snorting a little at Danzo's unapproachable manner, Hiruzen opened his mouth. Uchiha Fugaku made an interesting proposal. Fugoku. The sour face of the head of the military police force popped up in Danzo's mind. He sounded out the idea of Itachi joining the Umbu. The instant he heard this, Danzo's heart leapt up and nearly did a little dance. He was not foolish enough to allow this glee onto his face, however. He simply replied, I see, and waited for Hiruzen to continue. Fugaku says that Itachi likely won't be able to use his abilities to the fullest in the military police force. He's not looking at him as his own son, but from an objective perspective, he thinks Itachi possesses unparalleled talents as a ninja. He says it's his duty as a father to guide his son to a place where he can fully use that genius. And so he came to me about the possibility of the boy joining the Umbu. A darkness in the depths of his eyes, Hiruzen turned a questioning gaze on Danzo, but he hadn't gotten to the end of the story. He wrapped up by stating his own opinion. Hamura and Koharu are totally opposed. They say it's preposterous to have an Uchiha in the Umbu, given its status as a special unit under the direct control of the Hokage. They asked me if I'd forgotten about how the second Hokage established the military police force. The military police force was created to drive the Uchiha clan away from the central functions of the village. Sighing, Hiruzen packed tobacco into his pipe for the 3rd time. Maybe you could stop while we are discussing important business, at least. Like a child scolded by his father, Hiruzen shrugged his shoulders slightly in dissatisfaction before setting the pipe down on his desk. They went so far as to bring up your name, you know. Even if they did eventually agree to the boy being in the Umbu, what would you say, given your dislike of the Uchiha line? Nothing but pushback from those two. Hamura and Koharu, of the Konoha Council. They were also acquaintances of his since childhood, old people with no great talent who had not stood out in any way during the harder times of the fierce Great War when so many of their comrades died. They had managed to live such long lives through luck alone. But they had the self-awareness at least to know that they should gratefully accept the honorary positions on the council. They didn't have the power to push their own opinions through without leaning on someone with a bigger, more authoritative voice. So you're also. Can't we just let him in, then? Hiruzen's eyes widened slightly, a note of suspicion rising up in them. Naturally, he also thought Danzo would be opposed. But Danzo was not opposed in the slightest. Quite the contrary. Fugaku's proposal was a godsend. Right from the start, he had planned for Itachi to join the Embu, whatever he had to do to make it happen. Uchiha Itachi was an essential element in fulfilling Danzo's ambitions. So much so, that Danzo feared that Fugaku would harden in suspicion when he recommended the Embu. The fact that the proposal had come from that side was nothing other than a windfall. I know you're partial to Itachi, but I thought you would have shown some disapproval at putting him in the Embu. Hiruzen didn't try to hide the probing look in his eyes. Danzo was calm in the face of the other's man's suspicion. Itachi is the sort of ninja you see maybe once every 100 years. Even if he is an Uchiha, we cannot afford to not take advantage of everything he has to offer the village. That answers very you. The third Hokage nodded deeply as if convincing himself. If you approve, then I don't have any objection to Itachi joining the Embu either. To eliminate this rivalry between the village and the Uchihas, we need to first win over the hearts of the young people. Bringing Itachi into the center of village life should be a good opportunity for that. Danzo would never agree with Hiruzen's optimistic thinking. But he was grateful that the Hokage approved of Itachi's entry into the Embu, whatever his reason. But Itachi's only 11. We need to see that he's ready for the Embu. A mission to join the Embu, Exactly. Would you leave that to me? End of part 2. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe for lots more.